Okay, this is the lecture for Lesson 11, Vocabulary. Our vocabulary words we have for this lesson are angle of recession, baseline, which we learned about a little bit in Lesson 6, down plane, and also up plane, which we learned about in Lesson 9. And then we have some new terms, which I haven't talked about yet, isometric and oblique projection, which is this section right in here, and overlapping planes, and then point of view and 0-point perspective are two words where we're starting to talk about introducing the idea of Western perspective drawing using vanishing points. Okay, so to get started here, I'm going to move this book. Then I have, we'll be doing drawing with light, and that'll be the last thing we talk about in this lecture. And also these two workbook exercises that you'll have for homework. And I can talk about those right now. And all you're doing is you're going to use imaginary light source. And this is in an introduction, basically, to Project 4. Which has an imaginary light source. And so now you're using something very familiar, and all you're doing is imagining a light source. And in this one, it's overhead, illuminating this arrangement of boxes. And the idea here is to make the background somewhat darker so that the illumination of the overhead light will light these up. Now, we're going to work on something in class today, or you could be with your instructor, where you'll be actually getting an arrangement that's lit, and basically that's all you'll be doing is trying to work on that strongly lit still life. This one here has more of a imaginary light source. Could come from anywhere. It could be coming from overhead. It could be coming from maybe this lit room over here and casting shadows. Again, it's starting to learn how to use a light source in an imaginary way. Now, the key to doing both of these is that you shade the entire picture, not just certain areas. And the only thing that you would leave untouched would be areas of the brightest highlights. And where the light is striking something where you feel it would be the brightest. For instance, here, it would be if the light was coming from this back corner here, this would be left white, and this could be lighter, and things would get darker, and then this would be very dark in here because it wouldn't be getting as much light. That's one idea. This one here, if the light was coming from the top, the tops of the boxes would probably be whiter or white, where all the rest of this would get a value of some sort. Now you would use all your pencils in whatever manner that you would need to finish these two drawings, and that'll be for homework. And we'll do a little bit of this practice, or you will with your instructor, as I said, in the classroom. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing that we talked about in Lesson 6 was a baseline, and so I'm gonna put a baseline on this drawing here, on this piece of paper. Now I'm going to do a couple things. I'm going to draw something up here, and then I'm going to draw something down here. So I'm kind of starting to work on this upper half of the paper first. Now the idea of, I'm going to use a cube shape to start with. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to work my way across from left to right and talk about all of the different terms that we have in here today. So the first one, if you look at your book, is we have isometric and oblique projections. But, in doing that, I want to talk about a couple other things, and one of them is when starting to make a projection of something, the illusion, first of all, should be very simple, and you should be using only parallel lines. Now, sometimes drawing parallel lines, now you see what I did here is I put this sideways. Now you notice how these three lines here are parallel. But that's not that easy, that's not always that easy to see if you draw it like this. You could very easily draw it, let's say, something like this, And it might look okay to you, but if you look at it this way, you can see how these lines are just going in very, different angles. And so, first of all, the idea in a simple projection is to make you have only 3 sets of lines and they'd all be parallel in a simple projection. You'd have this set here, which are all parallel to each other. You'd have this set, well, I'll do a circle here. These 3 are all parallel to each other, and these 3 here, which I guess I'll do a little box. Now, a projection, if I was to go back down here for a minute, is if you took 2 overlapping planes, which is one of our vocabulary, let's say I make two overlapping planes. As you know, I'll do a square first. You say that's a plane because it's a shape. It's the illusion of a flat shape, anything that's enclosed in a line. Now, if I was to make another one, now they overlap. Now, anytime you take two overlapping shapes, all you have to do is connect them, and you've made a projection. If I was to take something, let's say take a circle, I could do the same thing. Now, in this one, what I'm going to do is I'm redrawing it, but I'm not going to draw in here as much, see, because I'm trying to make a projection out of this. That's a little easier to see. If we took a form that really has no real geometric shape to it, like some kind of organic form like this. Now, all you have to do is duplicate the shape. And anytime you duplicate a shape, and at this one I'm just trying to draw it, by looking at what's there. And maybe I'll do an okay job, I don't know. Here, let's see. So basically I duplicated this shape. And that's a projection. And I know it's getting a little sloppy here because I have a bunch of overlapping lines, but I think you get the idea. If I was to shade this, it would probably have a little more of an illusion for you. So you see, any kind of simple overlapping shape that's used more than once, if you hook the lines together, you'd have a projection. Now, there's the 2 basic projections are isometric and oblique, and that's what we'll discuss right now. So let's go back to this one, and we're working off this baseline here. Now, the reason I want to talk about working off a baseline is because you'll notice in this one, the front of the object is laying right on the baseline. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go across here, and the first thing I'm going to do is draw these bottom 2 lines for you to illustrate a real simple idea here. Now, what I'm doing is I'm drawing the base angles of recession, and what you're seeing is that this is the beginning of an illusion. So what happened here is I wanted to illustrate these angles to you. You notice how this one is straight across, and then it has one angle here from the baseline. Now, this one has what I'm doing is I'm just making a point of view. And here, I'll just complete the illusion here. And as I complete this illusion, what I have to think about is these parallel lines again. So look, if I turn this, and you see how the hardest lines to draw are these lines, these angled lines. And if you turn your paper when you're trying to learn how to do this, these 3 are the hardest to do, and you can get those really straight. Now, as we look ahead to a couple more lessons and talk about perspective is difficult. And it's not something that has to be difficult, but the beginnings of that are parallel lines first, because parallel lines really don't go to a vanishing point, and so you can get by pretty well with these projected type of shapes like these. And all this is a different projection of the shape as it turns. What you see in your book is only 2 different kinds, but there's a lot of different ways to do it. And that's what I'm illustrating right now. Now again, I will check this one. You see how I'm doing that? And I'll put this here, and I want to make sure that I get those all parallel. It's good practice. The other thing that's happening here is I'm making an illusion of a point of view. So here I'm going to check these again. And I got one more, and I'll be back to where I was when I started. So now, so now what I'm going to do is, let's say we take this side here, and I'm going to just lightly shade this side. Now, as that side, as your point of view changes, which means it's kind of like you walking around this shape. And you'll notice that as I go off to the right with each shape, you'll notice how the shape is turning, and the main indicator of how that happened as I walked around here were these base angles here. Now the 2 that you have in your book, and I'll just set this right here, are the oblique and isometric. Now I put the isometric in the middle. And what that means is these 2 receding planes on each side are equal. And the angles from the baseline are also equal. Now, oblique is a term that means any angle. Now, I used in the book a 45-degree angle, but it could be really any angle, and that's what I illustrated here. The rest of these are oblique, which means this set here and these 2 over here. Now, the reason we're talking about all this is because this is the really simple way to understand perspective without getting into all of the other rules. But actually it's only the beginning of perspective, because this is not really perspective. This is actually called 0-point perspective, which is another one of your terms. And what that means is there are no vanishing points, or no points at all, because when all the lines are parallel, they do not converge anywhere. So technically this is called 0-point perspective. It's called a projection. But these are the 2 basic terms. Now you'll notice how this angle could be any angle, but it's bigger than this one. But the point is there is an angle there. So the definitions that you'll see in the future are that when there is no angle, then you're looking at this one on the end, which will be called 1-point perspective. When, and this one also over here too, would be the same one. When there is no angle, you only have 1 angle in the projection instead of 2, then that will be a similar arrangement to 1-point perspective. But this is not considered 1-point perspective because the lines do not converge to a point. So it's called 0-point. But really it's what we're trying to relate to here is the fact that this is similar to 1-point in that the baseline only has 1 angle instead of 2. Now anytime a line goes away from you and is not straight across, it is called receding away from you. And that's called a line of recession or an angle of recession, and that's another vocabulary term. Now, when I say angle, and if I was to darken all these like this, I mean the angle from the baseline That's what I'm referring to. But what you can do is, and the great thing about this is that you can actually, if you were looking at, and I'm going to set this on here for a minute, you were looking at this in the studio and in the classroom and you wanted to draw it, you could actually lay your pencil on these lines like this. And you could hold your pencil out in front of you and pretend that you're looking at something like this, and you're holding it, and then you can take that same angle and actually transfer it right to your paper when you're drawing it. As long as you don't turn your pencil when you go from what you're looking to what you want to draw on your paper, this is a pretty accurate method of checking that angle. Now, if you had a straight line like this for your baseline, and you see as you move up, you can see those angles that I was drawing, and everything in here has an angle. All of them do. So what we're trying to learn here is to be aware of these angles, because that's the next step in learning how to draw illusion. Now, you'll notice that these have corners, and the most important corner that you want to learn about is the closest corner. Now, you notice that the two end ones don't have a closest corner because these two corners on this one and on this one are even. They're equally distanced from you, and the reason is because the baseline is straight across. As soon as they turn this way, then this corner is now farther away from you. These two are equally the same distance away. This one is closer to you than this one. This one is closer to you than this one. That's how you illustrate point of view, by changing angles. Now you can, and when you need to do something in an imaginary way, that's how you would do that. Okay. So we covered, okay, 0-point perspective. We did almost all of these here. I said that down plane and up plane, we did talk about those in lesson 9. And one of the values of this is when you're finishing up your project 3, which you'd be doing today, it's about the anatomy of light, which I talked about a little bit in lesson 9, but I really, I have to slowly kind of